Hello citizens and welcome back. A few weeks ago we talked about how small player bases are going to impact the economy and what aspiring base builders should expect. This week I want to expand on that video and talk about medium-sized bases, who operates them, and some risks and questions associated with them. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here is a shout out to our amazing patrons and channel members for their support of the channel and everything else I do. So first we should establish what a medium base looks like and who builds it and operates it. I think we can say with certainty that a medium base will be a long-term one or even a permanent one, especially given the amount of resources needed to construct it. A medium base will have several buildings, and I think we can generally split them into 5 categories: functional, support, logistics, defenses, and infrastructure. Functional buildings would, as the name suggests, fulfill the primary function of the base. For medium bases, I would expect one primary function and one or possibly 2 secondary functions. For example, let's say that you have a base with a few extractors and some refineries. That would be the primary function. But the available resources can be processed into fuel, so there is also a refueling terminal for ships and a large fuel storage. That would be the secondary function. There can actually be many variations of this. You could have a farm that also offers manufactured food. Or you could have a fleet-forward operating base that has its own fuel extraction and processing plant. In short, a primary function would be the main reason this base exists and would be tied to why it was built where it is in the first place. And secondary functions would complement the primary one. Next, support buildings would provide everything the other buildings need to function. So this would be generators for power and life support, and habitation and people-focused buildings, which will be very important, and we will explain why in a moment. This will also include a fabricator area where the maintenance staff can build replacement parts for the buildings. Logistics buildings would be all the cargo elevators, tanks, and open storages needed to store any cargo or items needed. This would also include open landing pads and hangars to store ships. I would expect that a medium-sized base would have multiple hangars available, even up to the largest possible size depending on the purpose of the base. Defenses are pretty self-explanatory. This would be any turrets, shields, walls, or landmines you place around your base. I am actually very curious about how players are going to build up their defenses based on the area where their base is. I think we're all keenly aware of how unreliable automated turrets can be. So I don't think we'll be able to rely on automated defenses as a single layer of defense. I think there will need to be some options to build manned turrets as a static defense, and especially for lawless areas there might have to be a permanent security detail or a quick reaction force available. In that case, the defenses would be there only to buy time for a strong response to be mobilized, but we will get into defending bases more in depth in a moment. And the final building category is infrastructure. This is pretty simple. Any roads, paths, tunnels, pipes, or conveyor belts would fall into this category. Basically, any structure that connects the other structures in the base. It would be very interesting if we were able to build pipelines and conveyor belts, and maybe even trenches and other earthworks. So now we know what a medium base looks like, and we can talk about who builds and operates it. Now, I'm sure that there will be a few mad lads out there who will build a medium and even large bases on their own. But in general, I would expect a medium base to be built, owned, and maintained by a medium or large organization. There are 2 main reasons why I think so. First is that building and maintaining a base, especially with multiple buildings, hangars, and other structures, will be very time and resource intensive. And second, the operation, maintenance, and defense of such a facility will likely require someone to be there at all times, and in dangerous areas for someone to even be online at all times, which is a big logistical and human resource challenge. But before we dive into the details of these challenges, I think I should explain what I mean by small, medium, and large organizations. Other people will have different opinions, but here's how I see it. Any organization under 500 members is small. Now, is there a reason an almost 500 member organization can't build a medium or large base? In theory, no. In practice, depending on their focus and location, they might struggle with funding, manning, and defending their base. A medium organization is anywhere between 500 and 1500 members, and a large organization is anywhere above that. You could also introduce a super orgs category of organizations over 5,000 members, but that's not necessary for the contents of this video. Looking at this breakdown and at how many and how large organizations there are in Star Citizen, you will find out that over 90% fall into the small organization bracket. And I would be very interested to hear your thoughts on why that is in the comments. Now, the size of the organization doesn't really matter. What actually matters is how many members they have online on average during a day, and how many members they can mobilize to do something on a short or long notice. Now, these numbers are actually pretty different across different organizations, so your mileage may vary. And obviously, larger organizations can mobilize more members. So now let's dive into the challenges of operating a medium-sized base. But first, let me take a brief pause to go over some public service announcements. Thanks to CAG, I am running another screenshot contest. The rules are the same as before, so you can submit up to 3 Star Citizen screenshots that fit the theme, Need for Speed, and you have to be a subscriber or a follower at the time of winner selection. The winner will get a Mustang Gamma with LTI, along with the Murray Cup paint, suit, helmet, and rifle. Next, the submissions for the next episode of the Star Citizen Q&A are open. And finally, I am running a Drake Golem giveaway sponsored by CAG. All links are in the description and the pinned comment. Now let's get back to the video. We already highlighted the biggest challenge anyone trying to build and operate a medium base is going to face, and that will be people. You will always want to have someone at the base looking after it, whether that is maintenance such as swapping out fuses or refueling the generators or fixing damage, or to supervise the refineries or fabricators, or to defend the base if needed. Depending on the security status of the location, that group of people might be bigger or smaller. For example, in a secure area, you might need just one person to manage things at any given time, or even leave the facility unsupervised. But in lawless areas, you might want to have a security detail on site 24/7 and a quick reaction force that can be mustered to respond to threats. Smaller organizations might have trouble maintaining this status. You don't only need to have the numbers to do this, but also the command structure and the logistics to be able to get these people where they are needed and when. This might be difficult for smaller groups, especially given the fact that most players will want to go out and do their own things. Now, obviously, small organizations could form alliances and build joint bases. This has the potential to fix the manpower issue. At the same time, over a longer period of time, I think that players will start converging around certain locations, and that might ease the logistics issues. The next big challenge is that bases are going to be money sinks. A base in a secure area costs taxes. A base in a lawless area requires defenses which cost money. And the expectation is that the larger the base, the more it's going to cost. So every base will either have to be able to make money for its existence, or there will have to be some other money-making asset somewhere else within the organization to support it. And once again, larger organizations have an advantage. They have more members to produce funds through the org tax and more assets that can generate resources and funds. Now, a lot of this depends on several factors. First being, how resource intensive is it going to be to build and maintain a base? Second, how difficult is it going to be to obtain land? If you do the math, you will realize that there will be more than enough land for everyone. But there are some limitations that you might not take into account when doing a basic area calculation. First of all, not all land can be built upon. For example, oceans and other bodies of water. Now, it would be very cool if CAG allowed us to build bases on water, but I don't expect that to be a tier 1 feature. Then you also have to exclude any kind of hazardous terrain or inaccessible terrain. Then I think there will be an exclusion zone around existing cities, outposts, and other settlements. This would be for balance reasons, but also to preserve the look and the skyline of locations that are handcrafted and placed on planets. And obviously, some areas might be reputation restricted before you can claim land there. Another thing we need to realize is that for individuals and small groups, a base would serve primarily as a homestead, whereas for an organization, a base is a tool. It can provide resources, or a processing area, manufacturing, or can be used as a means of power projection. So I imagine there might be quite a lot of competition for the best building locations, and a very high incentive to capture areas from other groups. Which brings us to the economic impact of a medium base. I think we can split the impact based on the type of the base. For industrial bases, I think we can expect that they can generate a significant amount of materials that can impact the local economy. And depending on how the trade routes are set up, they might even impact the adjacent systems. I think the more interesting impact of industrial bases might be in providing services. For example, that could be a refinery service provided to other players for a fee to generate funds. But more likely, I think we will see manufacturing facilities where you will be able to bring materials and credits to have an item or a ship of a certain tier fabricated or upgraded. I think these could become the cornerstone of a player-driven service economy. But we also can't forget that these bases can serve for defense and power projection. So technically you could use a base to gatekeep a certain area and thus reduce the volume of resources found there that are available on the market. It could also be used as a base of operations for a pirate group where they can rearm and store their loot before processing it further. So at this level we might already see some interesting impacts, but I'm very curious about how this would scale with larger bases and multiple bases per organization. In a future episode, I would like to dive into how large organizations might operate bases and space stations, and how they could leverage assets like the Orion and the Pioneer to support their resource needs. So stay tuned for that. And with that being said, that's all for today. What do you think? How difficult is it going to be to operate a base? Are we going to see many joint bases? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.